evening. May I introduce myself, Ibu Emmie, and from Universitas Sanata Dharma. I have a paper having the title. I have a research related with the translations of metaphor and simile in the Bible. So in this case, I would like to present it, the research that I have already done it. Okay, thank you. So first thing first, I have an introduction for my research. That's it. As stated by Lakoff and Johnson, that in nature, the human concept world is metaphorical. This is stated by Lakoff and Johnson. Okay, that's why the use of symbols and metaphors and gospel parables make the concept of religion is no longer abstract. And through symbol and metaphor, the concept of religion becomes more concrete and more understandable. Okay, so that's why I would like to make a research about that metaphor and symbols on the gospel. This is the introduction. And according to Ullman in Subroto, the metaphor is a kind of comparison between two things that are ununified or melted. And the comparison concrete and direct because of the similarities. Because the comparison is unified, it is not stated with the words or uh, as, like, and ape. And simile or like is a style of language that compares one thing to another by using conjunction and comparison. So the difference between metaphor and simile is that in metaphor we don't have a conjunction for the comparison itself, but for the simile we have conjunction for the comparison itself. And when a metaphor expands in the form of story, it can take the form of parable. Why do I tell about the why should I clarify the parable in this uh, my presentation? Because in my paper related to parable, that is the simile and the metaphor in the parable in the Bible. Okay, and usually the parable contains moral or spiritual teaching. The New Testament Gospel are an example that contains parables, and the Bible is the most widely translated book by this is stated by Kennedy and Jerry Newcomb, and there are two reasons of gospel translation. First is that Jesus' teaching are conveyed through the word, and the second one is that Jesus' teaching can be understood without language limitation. That's why I would like to make a research about the translation of the Bible, in this case the New Testament Gospels, and because Kennedy and Jerry Newcomb stated that the most widely translated book is what we call the Bible. Yeah. Why I make a research? Because most of the Jesus teaching on the parables are conveyed through words, and the second one is that Jesus teaching can be understood without language limitation. The next one. And there are some translation studies related to the metaphors and symbols that have been carried out. First is that analyze about the technical approaches and strategies and method of translating of metaphors and similes uh, by Jayanti, Paramita, Pelawi, and also the other research is that analyze the quality of metaphor translation has been conducted by several researchers. The quality of metaphor translation conducted by several researchers such as Vida, Hattonor, and stuff. But my research is different. In the study, there is no exploration of the form of the metaphor in the form of parable, and my research related to parable itself. This research uses a descriptive qualitative approach and it is product oriented. And the object of this research is Molina Albert translation technique in the parable of the New Testament Gospel 2009. Data sources. For the data sources of this research are first documents in the form of similes and metaphors in the New Testament Gospel parable of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And the other one is the information from the readers. We have readers consisting of 3 translation experts asked to assess the translation techniques. And the third data is that what we call data collection technique. And in this study, were content analysis with interactive analysis method and the forum group discussion. The validity of the data. The validity of the data use triangulation of data sources using simile and metaphorical type in the parables of the New Testament Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John in English and Indonesia. Now, we have a research finding. The research show that there are 5 types of similes and metaphors contained in the parable of the New Testament Bible. Abstract, 688 data, concrete 349, anthropomorph 419, and fauna flora 303. And synthesis, just we have 47 data. The research found that in the translation there is 16 techniques by Molina Albert. Okay, and the research finding, here we are. Look at the table here. The table here. That is also the percentage. And most of the technique that is used in the translations of this Bible is what we call established equivalence. And the number 2 is explanatory, and then modulation, variation, and compensation, and etc. Okay, now we have established equivalence. The translation of established equivalence as in the data we have here. Example. The meaning established equivalent is that in translation the meaning in dictionary are common. The meaning, this is having the meaning in dictionary and commonly used. For example, the word went out translated into keluar di dalam in the TL. It is dictionary meaning and it is commonly used. Number 2, we have explanatory translation techniques. There are 6% data that use explanatory translation technique. For example, the rain came down and SL kemudian turunlah hujan. The word kemudian in TL or translate language indicates more explicitly that it will rain. Yeah, so we have the word kemudian for TL. It means that the translation it's more explicitly than that it will rain. And the modulation techniques. From analysis, there are some data, 5% more data using modulation technique. The technique is carried out by changing the point of view. So we have different point of view from SL to TL. As the example for the word where then did the weeds come from? That's the language translated into dari manakah. The words where and comes from are translated into one dari manakah because the main focus is asking about lalam. Variation techniques. And the data number 4, we have variation techniques. Yeah. Here we are. The variation technique is translation technique by changing the linguistic elements. There are 4% data that use variation that use variation translation technique. SL you change into translate into kamo, yeah, in the data. And compensation techniques. Um, for example, for the data number 5 is that compensation techniques is, for example, there was a widow in the town, translated into dan di kota itu ada seorang janda. The word kota in TL comes first before the word janda. Okay. Paraphrase techniques. Paraphrase techniques, we have the example on the next data. In the translation from SL to TL, the translation becomes longer, and because there are additional information. Just look at the SL and TL. TL is longer than SL because there is what we call additional information. That's why we have called it paraphrase techniques. Reduction for data number 7, translation technique number 7. The word seed is omitted in the TL language. Okay, so we have a farmer went out to sow the seed, yeah, but in the TL there is no seed, just menabur. We don't have a seed for the TL. That's what we call reduction. And transposition technique is that the word grew SL is a verb SL, but after that change into dengan sudunya. That is what we call adverb. That's what we call, so change from verb to adverb. That's what we call transposition techniques. And additional techniques is that we have additional information for the translation from SL to TL. Pohon-pohon itu sudah bertunas is an addition technique used by the translator to add an explanation in the TL. So we have more information about the TL from the SL. Discursive creation techniques is that we have example on the data, the word init and SL. It means that init is sesungguhnya, but it is translated into sebaliknya, and this translation is out of context. That's what we call discursive techniques. And generalization technique, the word bushels in the SL is translated into pickle, yeah, in the TL is more general term. This is the data number 11, sorry. 1,000 bushels of wheat revised and then translated into pickle, more general. Adaptation techniques for number 12. It can be seen that the word lake and SL is translated into laut. The translation replaces lake with laut, which has some characteristic in TL. And literal techniques number 13 is that the word have, SL, is translated into ahli waris using this literal technique translation. And number 14, we have example for particulation techniques, that is the word farmer and SL changed or translated into penabur. This is farmer is petani, but for the TL translated into penabur. This is more particulation techniques that used in the translation. And linguistic amplification techniques is that is seen in the addition of the linguistic element on the data, on the example number 15, that is element sesudah diikatnya. Yeah, this is amplification techniques. And number 16, the techniques is done by synthesizing the linguistic elements of SL into TL. This is the linguistic compression techniques. Okay, so from the analysis, that the techniques that influence on the translation quality in the parable of the New Testament Gospel Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John are first thing first is common equivalence, explanation, compensation, variation, implicitation, paraphrase, linguistic amplification, transposition, linguistic compression, generalization, particulation. Those techniques are able to produce quality translations of simile and metaphor types, but reduction, discursive creation, and omitting techniques tend to produce less quality translation. And this is the conclusion. We have data for table for the conclusion. This just read in terms of translation quality, the above table shows that translation quality has high legibility result. The average cost obtained from all metaphors and simile data analysis obtained are 2.9 and 3. And this number means that the translation has high level of readability and as classified as easy and tends to be very easy to understand. And techniques that affect the readability of translations include command equivalence techniques, excitation, modulation, variation, and compensation, paraphrase, implication. And the use of the technique above it can be conducted that the use of translation technique in the metaphor and simile in the New Testament Gospel parables produces a very high quality of readability. And the research having a suggestion that is the New Testament Gospel text is a sensitive type of text that contains important information. Therefore, the omission technique should not be used. And the technique of adding redundant information must also not be used because it can influence the translation quality. It is necessary to carry out further research on the translation of the New Testament Gospel to reveal the phenomenon of the translation text of the New Testament by using different approach, not only objective but also effective and generative. Thank you. This is my research, and thank you for the time. And if there have a question, just ask. Thank you very much.